all sorts of things that I care about, all sorts of specific issues that I'm going to continue to work on, and I plan to lend my voice to focus the rest of my career on. I'll be out there advocating on behalf of doing something about climate change and doing something about inequality and making sure that women are getting the same opportunities as men and fighting against, there you go, and fighting against the forces of discrimination and tribalism and racism. But the single most important thing that I want to focus on is lifting up and identifying and working with and training the next generation of leadership, not just in the United States, but all around the world. And that's really the central goal of our foundation. It's going to be based in Chicago, my hometown, but we want to have projects, programs, partnerships, and digital networks everywhere. And I'm not just lending my name to the foundation, I'm going to be an active part of it. This year I've already met with young people like yourselves in Germany, in Indonesia, in Brazil, and then we had our first ever Obama Foundation Summit in Chicago. And I don't want to speak too long because I want to spend most of our time on questions, and Anshul is going to help to moderate it. But I did want to mention the reason I thought it was so important to do something in India. You've got the largest population of young people in the world, and that's a lot, so we might as well start big. There are all sorts of things that I care about, all sorts of specific issues that I'm going to continue to work on. And I plan to lend my voice to focus the rest of my career on. I'll be out there advocating on behalf of doing something about climate change and doing something about inequality and making sure that women are getting the same opportunities as men and fighting against, there you go, and fighting against the forces of discrimination and tribalism and racism. But the single most important thing that I want to focus on is lifting up and identifying and working with and training the next generation of leadership. I want you to know you matter. There's nothing, not a single thing that's more important to the future of America than whether or not young people all across this country can achieve their dreams.
We're the ones to inspire our generation, to disrupt a broken system, to rise up, take action and stand for the idea of opportunity for everyone. We are the ones to change statistics, not just for the sake of young men like me, but for the sake of America's future, our future.
We're the ones to not give excuses, to not wait for permission to challenge biases. We just do.
If they won't put our faces in their boardrooms, we won't put our faces in their stores.
We're the ones to act, to bring our unique gifts and talent,
to make sure America lives up to its grand ideals for our children and our neighbors' children. Because our futures are all tied together.
If there's no seat at the table, we'll bring our own.
We are the ones to encourage, to speak up, to stand out. I am my brother's keeper. We are the ones. I am my sister's keeper.
I am my brother's keeper.
I am my brother's keeper.
I am my brother's keeper.
We are the
I
ones.
am my brother's keeper.
Yo soy el guardián de mis hermanos.
I am my brother's keeper.
And I want you to be too.
Dream, and I'm not sure if it was a couple days later or like the next day, but I had a dream, guys, and I don't know if this is God's way of saying, because I asked the Lord, was I going to be martyred? Was I going to die for him? I didn't ask, was I going to get persecuted? Because I feel like that is persecution, but I feel like persecution can come in many different ways. It doesn't have to come through death. It can be in different scenarios. So I just asked him that question, and I feel like the next day, I think it was the next day or the day after, I got a dream, and the dream started off with basically I'm talking to a group of I would say teenagers, right? Anywhere from 12 to 18 or 19 or 20, right? And I'm telling them they need to know Jesus. They're all looking at me, right? So it's 20 of them right in front of me. And I'm telling them, you need to know the Lord. You need to know the Lord. You need to know Jesus. You need to get saved. And I'm not saying it in a very soft way. I am basically telling them loudly. I'm yelling at them. You guys need, I was in a rush. I was basically, I was in a hurry. It was urgent. I was telling them, you need to get saved now. You need to get saved now. This is the time. Stop playing around. All of you guys should know who the Lord is. You know what I mean? It's better to know him. It's better to be saved than to mess around and not know Jesus Christ. And I wasn't given a very soft preaching. It was more like John the Baptist. You know what I mean? It was more of like Elijah. Very harsh, very in their face and direct. And they looked at me like what? Like, this guy is crazy. Like, they just looked at me stunned, like they couldn't say anything, right? And they kept looking at each other like, who is this dude? And why is he yelling at us about Jesus? I can tell, I don't know if some of them were like, I don't know if they were thinking like, man, we should, soak this in, or were they looking at me like, he's crazy? But I felt like, I got the vibe like they were looking at me like, okay, you know what I mean? They're like, they weren't really listening. They were more like, I'm crazy, like this guy's nuts. So as I'm preaching to them and I'm telling them about Jesus and how they need to get saved right now, how it's super urgent or they're going to miss out, right? All of a sudden, they call the police on me. They call the cops, whatever. And again, it's not like every dream I ever had about me being persecuted or me being taken in by some sort of police. These are not irregular police. These are all black. To me, they look like New World Order police, okay? Every dream I ever have of coming across these guys, they're always wearing the same thing. They're always wearing, it looks like army wear, but it's just all black. There's no fatigue. It's all black. Black hat, black army, the fatigue, all black. They look like Black Ops, SWAT team type of New World Order police, okay? Every time these guys come, they're the same, okay? Now, when these kids or whoever call these New World Order police on me, I didn't see them this time, but in my heart I knew that they came and got me. And all of a sudden, they locked me in a prison, and I remember this prison very vividly, right? It was they didn't take me out of the building I was preaching at, or I was telling these kids about Jesus. What they did was, there was a prison already in there, which is kind of weird to think about now. There was a prison in the place I was preaching to these kids. So I was preaching, telling them about Jesus. They looked at me like I was crazy, and then they called the New World Order police on me, and I was sent into prison in that building. Now, that building, I didn't really get the visualization of the building. I just knew that it was the same building where I was preaching, and this prison was in that building. And I remember being like, all I remember, I'm sorry guys, I'm just very choppy right now, but all I remember is preaching to these kids, someone calls the cops, and I'm automatically, boom, transferred into this prison.
Hello everybody, I just wanted to share a dream that I had a little over a week ago. This was in America, and there was chaos and panic, and people were really in terror. And I had a lot of fear just as an observer. And what I saw was that there was a large, I call it civilian police force that had raised up. This was not the normal police force that we have on the streets today. This was a different group of soldiers or police force, and it's seen that some of these were Americans, but not all of them. And what I could tell very clearly is they'd had an order given to them to round up all the Christians and all the people that believed in the Bible. And the order was get every single one of them. Don't let a single one of them, run away or go astray. And so what I saw was, where I was taken, what I saw was there was a leader that was over a group of these soldiers. and I didn't hear anything. I heard no word spoken, but I saw a leader that was giving orders to a large group of these soldiers. And this was a black man, and his face, he looked just like Barack Obama and everything. And he was like pointing with a finger and giving them stern orders. And I had heard something before, and I just knew it, that the order he was giving them is they need to round up all the Christians and all the people that believe in the Bible. So the next thing I saw was there were these groups of Christians being put on large trucks, or they weren't trains. I describe it as it was like trucks from what I remember. And they were taken to these large warehouses, is what I would describe it as. It's like these large cement warehouses. And the next thing I saw, and this is the one time where I really heard a strong dialogue between people, is there was a group of Christians getting off this truck and a group of soldiers. And this Christian man was looking at this soldier, and he was yelling at him, and he was saying, "You don't even believe in what you're doing." And he said, "I have complete faith in what I'm doing, and I'm ready right now to die for what I believe in."
Policy.
There are all sorts of things that I care about, all sorts of specific issues that I'm going to continue to work on. And I plan to lend my voice to focus the rest of my career on. I'll be out there advocating on behalf of doing something about climate change and doing something about inequality and making sure that women are getting the same opportunities as men and fighting against, there you go, and fighting against the forces of discrimination and tribalism and racism. But the single most important thing that I want to focus on is lifting up and identifying and working with and training the next generation of leadership, not just in the United States, but all around the world. And that's really the central goal of our foundation. It's going to be based in Chicago, my hometown, but we want to have projects, programs, partnerships, and digital networks everywhere. And I'm not just lending my name to the foundation, I'm going to be an active part of it. This year I've already met with young people like yourselves in Germany, in Indonesia, in Brazil, and then we had our first ever Obama Foundation Summit in Chicago. And I don't want to speak too long because I want to spend most of our time on questions, and Anshul is going to help to moderate it. But I did want to mention the reason I thought it was so important to do something in India. You've got the largest population of young people in the world, and that's a lot, so we might as well start big. The country's going to be great, and the world is going to be better. So the question is, how do we do that? And part of what we wanted to do was to start trying out some different things like this field days. So in some ways, you guys are part of the process of us learning how to make sure that you guys feel like you can take over the world. And I understand you've been here all day, working hard, sharing stories, and trying to figure out how exactly you might start bringing about change in your local communities. And I want to see some of your handiwork. So everywhere we look, there's history to reflect on, and history to be made. That's what the Obama Presidential Center is all about. Honoring the stories of those who brought us to where we are today, and bringing people together to chart an even brighter future. Here on Chicago's South Side, the Obama Presidential Center will offer old friends and new visitors the chance to explore a world-class museum and gather together for celebrations of all kinds. It will add to the vitality of Jackson Park, adding new gardens, a larger playground, and scenic paths for an early morning jog or an afternoon stroll. And it will do all that while creating jobs and driving economic opportunity here in Chicago and enriching the landscape of the South Side that Michelle and I have called home for so long. I like to think of the Obama Presidential Center Museum as a tribute to what happens when ordinary people come together to do extraordinary things. Inside, exhibits will explore the fullness of the American story, from the promise of our founding documents to the movements that challenged us to live up to them. We'll tell the story of the volunteers who powered our campaign toward history, and we'll examine the 8 years of progress, setback, and hope that followed. You'll be able to walk through a full-scale replica of the Oval Office, relive the moments that defined my presidency, experience the impact of our history-making First Lady, and check out a few of her dresses too. And atop the museum, you'll be able to take in some stunning panoramic views of the city we love. We designed the Forum building with a focus on the creativity and imagination that's always defined this city. Here, we'll host programs and leadership trainings that will support and connect the next generation of change makers here in Chicago to those all around the world, and will open the newest branch of the Chicago Public Library, and on the roof, a garden, similar to the one that Michelle planted at the White House, and will even have a few beehives for honey. At the center of it all, a public plaza will welcome visitors for live performances and community festivals. A huge green lawn will be open to throw a frisbee or spread out a blanket. And once it turns cold, we'll open up the best sledding hill in the neighborhood. Of course, there wouldn't be the Obama Presidential Center without a place to play some ball. At the Program Athletic and Activity Center, you'll be able to join a pickup game or a dance class. That's the Obama Presidential Center, a place to not only come together to get active, but to take action. It couldn't be more important to us that it's happening right here on the South Side. This is the place Michelle was born and raised. It's where I got my start as a community organizer. It's where we bought our first house, built our family, and took the first steps on a journey that's still taking shape today. It's the place we found our purpose. Now we hope to give something back, because you never know where something that starts on the South Side might lead.
Dream still lives.
And our dream is of a world where we recognize each other's common humanity and that we shape for our children peace, justice, and opportunity for all. Best we can then do is just do our work and try to advance it as best we can, understanding that we will not finish the job. We essentially run the race, we carry the baton, then we pass it to the next runner, and the next runner goes and they have to carry it forward. as leaders that all of you are going to have to do is accept that sometimes there are going to be some contradictions. If you're organizing in a rural area, you're not going to immediately be able to expect that people are going to think the same way that somebody in a big city is going to think. You have to show some respect for where people are before you can take them where you want them to be. Which is why I think it's important for young leaders to listen as much as they're talking. People are more likely to change their minds about certain issues if the best we can then do is just do our work and try to advance it as best we can, understanding that we will not finish the job. We essentially run the race, we carry the baton, then we pass it to the next runner, and the next runner goes and they have to carry it forward. One of the things as leaders that all of you are going to have to do is accept that sometimes there are going to be some contradictions. If you're organizing in a rural area, you're not going to immediately be able to expect that people are going to think the same way that somebody in a big city is going to think. You have to show some respect for where people are before you can take them where you want them to be. Which is why I think it's important for young leaders to listen as much as they're talking. People are more likely to change their minds about certain issues if they feel as if they're being hurt. I look at the statistics, and it turns out that one of the best indicators of whether a country is developed or not is how does it educate its girls and how does it treat its women. So when I was in the White House, how does it treat its women? So when I was in the White House, for example, I started noticing about 6 months in, the women who were on my senior staff, oftentimes they weren't talking in meetings. After a while, I would have to call. I'd have to say, Melanie, you worked on this issue. What's your perspective? And then when they spoke, they had, amazing insights. Sometimes a woman would make a point, and then like 10 minutes later, a guy would make the same point. And for the men in the room, if your organization has no women leadership in your organization, then you're probably part of the problem, and you need to be part of the solution. So you need to also check yourself and monitor what you're doing in terms of the areas that you control.
Obama Foundation is getting up and running. What is your yardstick for success for the foundation?
It was October of 2016, Matt, and the president called me into the Oval and he said, imagine if over the course of the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, we find 1 million Barack Obamas and we find 1 million Michelle Obamas and we connect them to each other. And then the things that they do both in the United States and overseas will be exponentially greater than what we do. And embedded in that connection, when people who are really focused on making their communities better, you begin to see then the yardsticks of success. There is a program called the Obama Fellows, and Matt, to give you a sense of the scale of this, we picked 20 individuals for a 2-year non-residential fellowship. We received 22,000 applications to select these 20. And after a year, a story of Harry Grammer in Los Angeles partnering with Keith Watley in Oakland, who had never met. And Harry is now turning juvenile detention centers into vocational technical centers with the help of Keith Watley in Oakland. And we didn't tell them what to do. All we did was essentially take these two extraordinary people, connect them to one another, surround them with an ecosystem of people who wanted to be helpful with them, and they're making their communities better. And so in a lot of ways, that becomes the prototype for the type of network that we want to build.
Yeah. So our conversation this afternoon is about civics education. What is the role of civics education in your portfolio and the portfolio of the organization, and why have you prioritized civics?
So by the time you get to the Harry Grammers or the Keith Watleys or the Kuketsu in South Africa who are in their 30s, you've missed an entire generation of people. And so imagine if you can go into K through 12. Imagine if you can get young people essentially coming out, and while learning the three branches of government at a minimum is important, while learning that you have the responsibility to engage in your democracy as a citizen and a participant is important, there's something much deeper than that, which is that notion of I have agency, I have a voice, I have power. I need not think about my participation in a democracy as my ceding that power to a representative who will act, in the best case, on my behalf. But what are my responsibilities to it? And so we have a partnership with the Chicago Public School District, and we're going to announce some awards at the end of this month, which is essentially our experiential civics awards. So what is the example of the student who brought together his peers in his class to help clean up a park, didn't wait for anybody else, but said, there's a problem, I have a responsibility to fix it? How about the teacher who said, as you learn about the alderman and the mayor and about the president and about Congress, where do you fit in? How can you express your active citizenship in an open way? And so in some ways, civics for me and Civics 101 for the Obama Foundation goes back to something that, whether you agreed with President Obama or disagreed with President Obama, when he launched this campaign in 2007, there was a riff that he would talk about, which was one voice can change a room can change a neighborhood, one neighborhood can change a city, can change a state, can change a country and the world. But implicit in that, Matt, is that notion of that one individual with power and agency to basically stand up and say, not just I have rights, because too often a discussion about civics or citizenship devolves to simply the view of the rights that I have, which are important and we need to zealously guard them. But here's the other piece. What are my responsibilities? How do I fit into this society in a sense of community, especially with people that I disagree with, or people who look differently than I do, or who come from a different place? In some ways, our education system is exactly where that is nourished for the first time.
Now, one of the questions